to the interwebs out there. Say hello. Welcome to the world of Third Degree with JD. The questions will be tough. They will be hot. Hopefully they will be decisive and bring a little excitement to this podcast for our at least one subscriber that we have right now. So I appreciate you, whoever you are out there. Thank you very much. And we will certainly do our best to entertain you. That is our job. So thank you very much. So BA, by all means, opening statements. Feel free.
So I'm Burnett Assassin, Christy Martin. I have a background, I was raised 7th generation Shujariya, so a lot of healers in my family. My formal studies are human behavior, specializing in trauma, and that's complex trauma, post-traumatic trauma, stress, and super excited to have this conversation. Renee.
Renee Whitney. So I've had a few experiences in psychological operations on a military front, and what that means to incorporate in different countries, how that affects those different behaviors in audiences. And I'd like to discuss a lot of how that incorporates in Sex and Berries.
Mm-hmm.
But moreover, I'm just super excited to be able to be a part of this because I think it's going to be epic. So,
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
I truly appreciate both of you ladies joining me here today. And of course, we have to give the nod to the wonderful Mrs. Kelly Davis, who is our in-house videographer and videotaper.
Thank you, Kelly.
She will be taking care of all of the programmatic photos.
She's
and
too
everything
cute
that
to
we
be
made.
behind the scenes. Look at her.
She is
She's a
very
big helper.
She is.
So, what is femininity? How has that been defined over time? How has that been defined for us over time by our environment, the people around us, our religions? Screaming our voices into the jungle to get our mate's attention or potential suitor's attention to where we are today. And how is that all transcribed over time? And what does that mean? What has been brought from generations before us through today? And how is that either informed our intellect or hurt our intellect, our development? And are we as a society progressing, or are we regressing?
Mm-hmm.
Or is everything that we see today, in fact, a natural cycle that is nature? Reading previously the book, Charles Darwin here, the Descent of Man, one thing I got from out of that was things have been going on for a very long time. The things that we see are not new.
I believe now and always that words are very important. And so the words that we use in having these discussions should be carefully chosen. So when we say things like masculinity, femininity are under attack, I would prefer to say under scrutiny. So what we're doing is we're looking at it and we're redefining, has what we've used for hundreds of years, thousands of years, actually working for us right now? Or do we need a different paradigm for that? And when we're looking at if masculinity is up first, I think that there's a beautiful old paradigm of what a divine masculine is, and as a giver and a protector, as somebody who can provide, as somebody who can stand up and stand to the homestead, and we have all of these kind of archaic beliefs, but they've stood the test of time.
Of these things impact our daily lives. How does it impact marriage? How does it impact communication? How does it impact the very actions that men take? that women take, that, you know, because I mean, I think we can all agree that toxicity is not subjective to one species, male or female. I think that exists on both sides. You can be just as much a toxic man as you can be just as much a toxic woman. And that's what we will eventually get to in future podcasts, is how does all of this translate into that, into dating, into communicating. Perfect for this whole instance here, to breed and to acquire a mate. That's when they are the most vocal. And when they are not, as the book points out, they either communicate minimally or they are absolute mutes in the process.
People aren't doing that anymore. You know, we leaned so much on religion for so long to tell us how to be. And now that we're redefining it in ourselves, you have to go back to every single thing. Like, what do I think is moral? What do I think is okay? What is good? What is bad? What do I personally think, you know, is good? And then what do I bring to the table? What do I expect from a partner, right? So we're doing that as individuals more and more. And men as a whole, I think, are just stuck. They're stuck in that old paradigm, which is, I mean, in their functionality as a toddler, that's what you look at. A toddler and a teenager, you're looking at big emotions around the fact that you're asking them to do more, right? You're growing up. We need you to do more. And you're going to get that pushback. And that's what we're seeing from men right now. The thing about it is that we as women, if we really, really want the paradigm shift for a healthy, whole masculine, have to be ready to hold space for when we say, it's time to feel your emotions. It's time to just not be that stoic dude who doesn't feel anything, right? Because we're looking for partners now. It's not man and woman. Like you said, you know, we're shifting to where we want partners. And if our partner is going to talk to us, then he has got to feel like it is okay to not have the world on his shoulders. He has got to feel like it's okay if he's missing a paycheck. He's got to feel like it's okay if he's not the most masculine dude in the room. Like, am I still attracted to you? Do I still want to take you home? Are you still my man? If you feel things that aren't just blank, you know, and we have to hold space for that as women. Yes. It is time for us to be strong enough for our men to feel their emotions, which is really, really hard. And asking them to do that is going to take years. I mean, that's going to take years. It took us, you know, over 100 years just from voting to being where we can hold down an entire household, right? We've taken over that paradigm essentially. And now we're going to, you know, it's time for us to step up and say, you can heal, and we can hold space for that. We're strong enough to hold space for you to sit down and be like, I feel things and they're huge and they're big and I need to cry and I need to talk about this. And it may not be anything we're trying to talk about, you know, it may be your childhood, you know, how you were raised, all these things, because we've been talking about that and it's hard and we know how hard it is.
Yeah.
But getting a man to open up in that, he's gonna have to be just surrounded by camaraderie.
It's a paradigm shift.
Perfectly comfortable being a woman. Always have been, always will be. I'm very happy with that. But the cosmic subject that we are addressing right now with how the shift is changing, and you're right, to both of your points, we have sustained a perpetual growth in women that have advanced us to a point where we are thriving in today's day and age, and we are within our sewing circles, and we are within our communications, and we are getting stronger. But as men evolve, and as men grow, and as men reach their own titles,
it is extremely difficult for them to reach a comfort zone. So I say all that to say there's two things that I wanted to address here. The first one is the lessons that we give to our children by the masculinity and the femininity. First and foremost, with my daughter, I teach her that you have got to fully love who you are before you can embrace that in another human being. Whether it is a male or female, it doesn't matter, or non-binary, or whatever titles they want to have or address. We as individuals need to understand who we are as an individual and love everything about who we are and what makes us who we are. It is vital to have our circles, it's vital to have our community, it's vital to have that bolstered positivity. But if it doesn't come from who we are internally, then we'll never reach who we are supposed to be as humans.
And how often, really, I mean, if you think about that, and this gets at another segment of this podcast, which is the toxicity within parenting. How do we...
3 or 4 segments for that.
Right.
How do we, outside of, just improving ourselves, that's one step in this process. But how do we then inform all future generations, to include our children, to understand those things, all these things that we've been talking about? What does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? What are those rules? What is okay? What is not okay? How do they fit into that? I mean, when you look at that, did you have any of these conversations with your parents ever?
Yes.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Like, I know for me personally, and I went back and I tried to think of what is a moment in time where my parent taught me something or said, hey, Johnny, XYZ. Hey, Susie, XYZ. And we've had this conversation kind of,
So, to the manual part, there was a joke when you first become a parent, or even before, when you're in the conception portion and you just find out that you're pregnant and you're going to have a child. The number one joke of this manual that does not exist, because all of us are winging it, no matter how much education you get, no matter how much advice you get, you're going to screw something up. But the first manual paragraph in this book was, you are your worst critic as a parent, and not to be so hard on yourself, because we are our worst critics as humans. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we do. I'm not stating that every single human on earth is absolutely flawless and that we need to give ourselves a pat on the back. What I'm saying is we are going to mess up as humans. We're going to miss the mark. And the only thing that we have to go forward is to remember those mistakes, understand our history, reevaluate our history, go back into our history, because it's often stated that if we don't do that, then we're doomed to repeat it because we forget it.
And doing it, I think, with intention with our children is paramount. So, when you have these young men and young women, you have these children, and I'm, with you, I didn't have parents that taught me anything about how to be anything. I raised myself, and so when my kids came, I had to take a very forceful look, inner critic too, but also say, I don't know how to do this. I'm not a good human, so how the hell am I supposed to teach them how to be good humans? This is beyond flawed, though. When I had my daughter, I was a bad person, and I can look at that and I can be like, man, having her changed everything. I was like, I got to be better for this, but I don't know what better looks like. And same with my son, at that time, I couldn't tell them, this is what a healthy young lady, this is what a healthy young man does. I don't know, but what I can do is hold space for you as a human, your authentic human, however you came to be. My son is very, very emotional. He's very sensitive, but he's also a little badass, so it's, you know, that diversity is already in him. And I just encourage that, like, hey, it's okay to cry. Also, like, cool, you killed a thing, you know, that's who he is, you know. And, you know, just being able to say however you feel isn't wrong. I think that's just a big step in raising healthy humans, is to say, I don't need to raise a badass dude. I don't need to raise a boss ass female. I need to raise the kids I was given to be healthy human beings, and to know, like you said, you have space to be whatever that looks like.
Yep.
You know, and if they dig chicks, if they dig dudes, like, that's just orientation. That has nothing to do with whether they're good people or not good people, but it's teaching them from the beginning. You have to define what you think is moral and ethical.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do that, you base everything else around it. You have to know the consequences. Now, if this country believes something is moral or ethical, and you do not, and you're going to do it, there are consequences, right? So you have to understand that. But raising them, like you said, to ask themselves, you know, and for me to say, are you comfortable being you? Right? Because I didn't have that space.
It depends. Who is your circle and who are your friends as a man? Because without question, there are circles that would not allow this to take place. It is
It's just
the
the way.
paradigm has not, the paradigm has not shifted yet.
Mm-hmm.
It may never shift
Right.
with some individuals. But I think that's what we're trying to achieve here. Is, hey, and what I think is somewhat transpiring within the military community with males and the whole force is, because it's perpetuated there too, that,
Oh yeah.
hey, you have to row. That's your one and only job. Row. And keep rowing.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a shift. And I think that's one of the intents of this podcast, is to bring that depth back to communication, back to men and women, and say, that's okay. That's perfectly fine to have these conversations. I don't care if you are 250 pounds in a brick shithouse. I know you can have just the same amount of issues as I can that has felt 170 pounds. You can have those same issues. And that's okay. And there needs to be a space for that to occur. And that's okay. Now, that doesn't mean you gotta be all touchy-feely, and that's not, it doesn't have to happen like that. We're talking about depth of communication, and really the depth of that thought process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking you to think and actually interpret what's going on in your mind.
So
And the
that's
feelings that are around that, and recognize that's perfectly okay.
beneficial to have that thought process, and I'm grateful that we're having this podcast to help crack that nut. But I think it's also important that we reiterate that that acceptance hasn't hit that paradigm in society, and that we still struggle as a society in humanity with men and women. Because if we don't have a certain character about us, then we may not be accepted into those circles until we have proven that certain characteristic or that certain flaw that is within the others. And so it is very difficult for us as a society to bring into the fold those personnel that may seriously need it more than the others.
100%. And to know that men, to this point, have repressed emotion to the point that even saying the words "I feel"
Yes,
can completely disrupt their nervous system to the
Yes.
point that they are in fight or flight.
absolutely.
Right, and so it's actually
100%.
they're literally paralyzed.
Mhm.
So creating a safe space just for them to reach that point is almost
Impossible.
it's a huge struggle, and proving it. You know, I think there's a proving process, and even when you go through so many things, I'm dated enough toxic men to know, like there's nothing you can do to create safe space. They have to very much want it and then sit in that, and you're just kind of adding to it. But again, you know, I wouldn't be able to do that if I wasn't backed by so many women that I can talk to, that I can have very deep conversations with. And it's almost so simple to me now than watching, you know, my close male friends and the men that I dearly love struggle with just watching them feel without them even stating the feeling, feeling the feeling, moving into the feeling, having the feeling disrupts the nervous system, you know, so they've just gotten to the point where I feel nothing, and that's safe to them.
That's comfort.
That's comfort.
That have had multiple partners.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying that I'm not completely happy with the single monogamous relationship that I'm in now currently, because I'm very, very lucky in many ways in my own personal relationship now. But looking back on my past experiences, I can completely understand where you would find a sense of joyful freedom in that thought process. Because
Joyful freedom. That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah.
Right? Because you do not have to have a restriction that you feel.
And maybe that's it. Maybe that's where the choice is in the freedom. Like, do I need to go do it, or am I doing it because you're telling me I can't?
I personally don't feel restricted in my relationship, but then I also have a lot of communication in that one person. And sometimes I'm sure that they feel like they are married to more than one person with the options that I give them. But
Amen.
right, but I can completely understand how that feels for you, and that, again, that joyful freedom, that restrictionless opportunity that you have for a daily basis, and how you could feel joy for that. And that's how society was for a very long time. It was never populated in books. It wasn't written in scripture or Bibles, but yet that's how people were able to communicate properly and have this tie to one another. And there was no ill will about it. So I can completely understand that, and I commend you for that.
There was a great touching point too, because you know, what you said is the communication. So then it again comes down to, you know, the relationships that I've had with females, where the communication is completely open.
Oh yeah.
Everything is like out there, and there's a sanctuary to that, versus, you know, my personal relationships that I've had with men, where they are very closed off, and it is very difficult to discuss things like intimacy, and especially when it comes down to,
I still want to talk about
well, moving forward, even when it is
Yes.
sex, you know, even when it is sex, like, hey, this isn't really, you know, where I want to be. I kind of want to do this or try this, and it's just a hard impasse. So again, it just comes, you know, to communication and saying, like, okay, I could probably just do this, you know, with this one person, but it needs to look like this. It needs to look open. It needs to look a little bit more adventurous, or you know, whatever it is. But you're right. It would come down to just radical communication.
Well, on that one, I appreciate both of you guys coming
Oh,
and sharing.
absolutely.
This
So
has
excited to be
been
doing this.
absolutely amazing, minus the flawed issues, which will work out.
Semantics.
But I think that gets this conversation proves to me that we're on the right track, because everything that we are saying stair steps into everything where we want to talk about. Having those radical conversations, what is deemed radical, you know, could be just a conversation to some. But it gets back to those questions. How did we get here? Why do men feel and think the way they do? What are those conversations of intimacy? Might as well be a spear to his chest. Or why is that so difficult? Why? Well, I think now understanding, and the more we kind of look into this and delve into each of these subjects, is there's been an imprint generationally that some may agree is completely on track. Some are counter to that. Maybe there's a happy medium. You know, I don't know. those conversations need to be had. And I think they will make for great conversations in the future on Third Degree with JD.
Well, thank
So
you for
again,
having
I
us.
appreciate everybody.
It's been great. I hope it resonates with people.
I think if people are willing to listen, take 5 minutes out. You know, I know this has gone on
A little longer than 5 minutes.
a little longer than 5 minutes, but if you're willing to listen, which I think that's the first thing, we have to be willing to accept. We have to be willing to educate ourselves and challenge the status quo and challenge what we've been told. Americans are notoriously, independent. Why should we not apply that in our daily lives when it comes to education? We challenge everything. Our civilization was founded on challenging the status quo. So, no, I think it's absolutely worthy of future conversations, and I definitely look forward to having those conversations going forward. So thank you for coming today.
You're most welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We've been told, how we've been influenced, when we have parental figures, in a matriarchal society. If grandma says something, if grandpa says something, that was gospel in my eyes growing up. They could do no wrong. I would never have questioned my grandpa growing up. Are you kidding me? Like, a grandma would have been on my butt for that stuff, and vice versa. So, but the institution of those thought processes have really transcended time and are still, which is crazy to think. You mentioned, the women's rights movements, the right to vote. That wasn't too far. That wasn't long ago.
No.
In the grand scheme of things, which is amazing to think. Like B.A. was talking, like, oh, you can just, the female body is my body because I signed this document that says it's mine. So be it. Wow.
Which we literally just took away again.
Yes.
And
Roe
it's
versus
like,
Wade got redacted.
Wow. Okay. But I think a lot of that drives the issues that we see now. And that is that identity crisis. And I think even more so, there is so many more questions being posed today, which aren't necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Not that I agree with them all or any of that, but when you're looking at things like transgenders, binary, non-binary things in society, classifications, I would say, whatever, deviations of the norms. I think those are
Part, but from what I've gathered in my experience, which is minimal to some people out there, and it's understandable, but masculinity and femininity are not simply segregated to males and females.
100%.
And it is so wonderful that we are living in this cataclysmic chaos right now, because we are able to drive that train left, right, forward, backward, and help mold what that means. And to your point, and yours, JD, I think it's important that we recognize that those men and those women have both masculinity and femininity.
100%.
My mother was actually allowing my grandfather to climb into a hole and not be a whole of who he was. So with that example, it reaches back generations, as you stated. Now, I'm not going to go back to the Stone Ages with my example, but I think that we have had a perpetual problem in today's society that reaches back a few generations, where women and men were not on the same footing. women, for a very long time, held up the pillars of a family and the home while trying to create and sustain their own identities.
Hurtful because we live in a society currently that I think for the last 40 years we have had a certain standard, and we have tried to revolutionize that standard into our own identities. It has not created a benefit, it has created a breaking point. It's extremely difficult to look at a person who doesn't identify in your mold to say this person is the strong example of what we want as a male or a female. Because to be a woman, you're supposed to be feminine and dainty and cute. Never mind the sapiosexuals who are attracted to the brain. Never mind the strength that they have to birth children. Never mind the strength that they have day in and day out to help build up their family or their career or whatever stance they want to take. And the men are lost because they have been ingrained since day one. Well, you're supposed to provide for the family. You're supposed to take care of the family. You're supposed to have this great career. You're supposed to be the breadwinner. You're supposed to have this standard encapsulated in this cocoon. But when you break out and you become a butterfly, no matter what you do, it's not a perpetuated state. It's a one-off.
Mm-hmm.
Another conversation, but I think that you struck a lot on a great segue into what is feminine. What is feminine? So I again pose the question to each of you as ladies. What does or what is femininity or the divine feminine to you?
I think that's so much still in the works, just like I think that healthy masculinity is still something that's under so much subjugation, and it's becoming easier to define as a woman because we are working so hard to be healthy. I think the rise in the divine feminine, like you said, over the past 40 years has been an insurgence that we haven't seen in history. It's absolutely insane. I mean, in 1973, man could still rape his wife legally. If she refused sex, he could rape her. And to see in one generation women stand up and say, this will not be our story, because there's nothing that the men were doing at the time that we couldn't. And so we started to do those things. You know, we worked, we earn, you know, we raise kids by ourselves, we have fun with our friends, we take ourselves on vacations, we buy our own groceries, and we pay our own bills, and we still thrive, we still learn, and we still gather, and we still create. And I think that is the most beautiful and absolute definition of what it is to be a healthy and divine feminine, is that we are unstoppable. There's nothing that is going to stop us from creating beauty, from creating home. Anything that you give a healthy woman, she will multiply. And we have decided to do that on our own because we had to stop relying on the men we were seeing. And I'm not, again, saying that they're not out there. I'm just saying that it just seemed like men stopped when it came to providing or protecting. If that wasn't the definition of what they could do anymore, you mentioned it as emasculating, but we stopped looking for that old paradigm a long time ago, and we started looking for partners. And that's when we felt a lot of kickback, I think, from men, that they didn't want to partner. They want the old paradigm. They want the woman at home and the men working. And like you said, it hurt too much everybody because you were fulfilling a role that wasn't innately yourself. And the radical impotence that has really driven men down to be very small, I think is a baseline for the toxicity and for the and that's such a terrible word, but for the lack of health that we're seeing. It's because they're doers and they don't have an outlet for their doing. So, you know, we have more Facebook fights and social media wars and, well, they said this and they said this and I saw this on the news, but nobody's, you know, taking that next step of action.
Are we, as a society, emasculating men to the point that it's degrading their value, both mentally, physically, all of that? Like, one example that they got and was, you know, as we matured from quadrupeds and all these things for his stuff, our canines reduced in size because, one, we never used them. We quit using them. So there was no longer a use for them. So they shrunk. That one, I appreciate both of you guys coming.
Oh,
and sharing.
absolutely.
This
So
has
excited to be
been
doing this.
absolutely amazing, minus the flawed issues, which we'll work out.
Semantics.
But I think that gets this conversation proves to me that we're on the right track, because everything that we are saying stair steps into everything where we want to talk about. Having those radical conversations. What is deemed radical? You know, could be just a conversation to some. But it gets back to those questions. How did we get here? Why do men feel and think the way they do? What are those conversations of intimacy? Might as well be a spear to his chest. Or why is that so difficult? Why? Well, I think now understanding, and the more we kind of look into this and delve into each of these subjects, is there's been an imprint generationally that some may agree is completely on track. Some are counter to that. Maybe there's a happy medium. You know, I don't know. But I think all of those conversations need to be had. And I think they will make for great conversations in the future. On Third Degree with JD.
Well, thank
So
you for
again,
having
I
us.
appreciate everybody.
It's been great. I hope it resonates with people.
I think if people are willing to listen, take 5 minutes out. You know, I know this has gone on
A little longer than 5 minutes.
a little longer than 5 minutes, but if you're willing to listen, which I think that's the first thing, we have to be willing to accept. We have to be willing to educate ourselves and challenge the status quo and challenge what we've been told. Americans are notoriously, independent. Why should we not apply that in our daily lives when it comes to education? We challenge everything. Our civilization was founded on challenging the status quo. So, no, I think it's absolutely worthy of future conversations, and I definitely look forward to having those conversations going forward. So thank you for coming today.
You're most welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.